Jody make it? Where's Jody? Where's Jody? Are we good? Huh? It wasn't hard enough? It sounded loud. Inside? Oh, there she is. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Omaha. My name is Sherry Connor and I will be the worship associate this morning. If you are a guest or a visitor with us, we hope you had an opportunity to chat with our hospitality team in the foyer, fill out our guest information sheet, and peruse the literature in the pews. Everyone is invited downstairs after the service for coffee. And visitors, if you are comfortable, please take a blue cup, which indicates you would enjoy conversation with members. Please also visit the welcome table where you can find information on Unitarian Universalism and our church. All visitors, their friends and relatives of members are welcome to attend all church social functions. Assisted listening devices and large print orders of service are available in the church entryway for your use. Greeters can direct you to these resources. Please sign in on the pink sheets in each pew. And this is much needed information which we use to follow the attendance trends and recognize visitors. Parking is directly west of the church in the surface parking lot or on the street. We would like to save space in the surface lot for those who need to park closer. You may park in the Midtown Crossing parking garage to the west of the church. The entrance to the parking garage is on Farnham Street. You must have your ticket validated for free parking. To have your ticket validated, downstairs in the common room, you will find a ticket validating machine on the south side of the common room on the bookcase. And once again, you can ask and someone will point you there. The sanctuary foyer has a speaker and a comfortable chair for those who may need to comfort a child during the service. Chancel flowers were provided today by Kaylin Goldner. Thank you. And one announcement about what's happening this evening, 6:30 p.m., Cup's Midsummer Night's Harvest celebration. They say, bring your own lawn chair and a dish to share. And one other announcement, downstairs in the common room after the service, the library lady will be in the common room after the service. She has available for checkout a church Kindle, and our newest acquisition is a book on humanism titled Becoming More Fully Human, Religious Humanism as a Way of Life. Our opening words come from Carl Sagan's The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. When we recognize our place in an immensity of light years and in the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life, then that soaring feeling, that sense of elation and humility combined, is purely spiritual. So our emotions in the presence of great art or music or literature, or acts of exemplary selfless courage, such as those of Mohandas Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., the notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a disservice to both. Chalice lighting.
Does anyone want to come help me light the chalice? Anybody else besides Pele? All right. Oh, let's see. Can you grab that poster for me? All right. Sorry, I'm not quite familiar with the technology here yet. Yeah, how do I extend the wick? There we go. No. The wick needs to. Oh, that one has more of a, let's use that one. All right. What out? Oh, okay. We'll get better at this. All right, please, you guys can stay up because the story is actually next. And if everyone will join us for the chalice words. At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. All right, does anyone else want to join us for the story? The young or young at heart? You'll be able to see the pictures if you come a little closer. Anybody else? Come on, come closer so you can see. Pele's going to show the pictures for those of you who are sitting up close. Come on. No? Okay. All right, our story today is called Me and Dog. This is a kid whose name is Sid. He's just an ordinary kid. Turn so everybody can see. He makes mistakes. They're mostly small, except for when they're not at all. This is Murphy. He's Sid's pet. He's the world's best dog, Sid bets, but just between us, me and you. Murphy's ordinary too. Murphy's pretty smart, but he thinks a bit too much of me, says Sid. To him, Sid is not just a short grade schooler kid. To him, Sid is supreme, almighty ruler, super duper boss and king of absolutely everything. So yesterday, while getting mail, oops, Sid stepped on Murphy's tail. He yelped, then blinked his big brown eyes and started to apologize. See, Murphy thinks when things go bad, he must have somehow made Sid mad. Happy things get understood as his reward for being good. It isn't true. The world is large, and Sid is just a kid. Sid says, I am not in charge. I sometimes think there is no boss. That most things happen just because. Sid says Murphy does not agree. He sits around and worships me. He thinks that if he begs enough, Sid will give him lots of stuff. Bits of beef and chunks of cheese, things to chase and things to squeeze, things to honk and things to shove, and things that only dogs could love. It's silly how Murphy prays and pleads because Sid gives him all he needs. Because he doesn't want Sid to be mad. Murphy tries to not be bad. And he isn't, Sid admits, except for when he is, a bit. Sid wonders if his dog would be as good if Murphy ever understood that Sid is not the Lord and King of absolutely everything. Would he be fearful or less friendly or less cheerful if he knew Sid is not the whiz and maybe even no one is? So let's not tell him now, says Sid, that I'm just a very ordinary kid. It seems to work out perfectly. 'Cause Sid loves Murphy and Murphy loves Sid. The end.
Our Heritage Minute this morning is about our Transylvanian partner. This summer marks the 28th anniversary of the establishment of our partnership with the Unitarian Church in Firtos Martinos in the Transylvania region of Romania. The UUA's partnership overall with Unitarian churches in Transylvania began in the late 1980s when Nicolae Ceausescu, I knew I'd stumble over that one, the longtime dictator of Romania, announced a policy of bulldozing a number of small villages and their churches in the Transylvania region, where 73% of the population is Unitarian. His assassination in 1989 prevented the implementation of that policy. However, the period of political instability which followed left the status of these people, their villages, and their churches in a state of uncertainty. In January of 1990, UUA President William Schultz sent representatives to meet with the Transylvanian Unitarian bishop. The bishop suggested a partnership relationship. Our church chose to participate in that partnership. There's a long and colorful history of the Okay. Should I wait or shout? Shout! Knock yourself out. All right. In 1565, Francis David, the founder of Transylvanian Unitarianism, was appointed court preacher by King Janos Sigismund. At the Diet of Torda in 1568, the king declared Unitarianism the official religion of Transylvania. So much for separation of church and state. Unfortunately, Sigismund died a few years later and was succeeded by a king who saw Unitarianism as heresy and imprisoned David, where he died in 1579. This church's first mission to Firtos Martinos was undertaken by First Unitarian members Mike and Mary Jo Stoll in 1991. This was a perilous journey fraught with uncertainty and no small amount of danger. The intrepid couple had to smuggle funds for the church through various checkpoints and suspicious customs agents. 2 years later, Reverend Ron Knapp and several parishioners from First Unitarian traveled to Firtos Martinos to further relationships with the church there and to bring them much-needed money. The members of the Omaha pilgrimage were successful in establishing a bond with our sister church, which continues to this day. The church at Firtos Martinos is a small but very impressive structure, serving a population of approximately 2,500, which includes the town and surrounding areas. Each year, we send funds to help with their expenses and to provide scholarships for the young residents who attend as boarders at the Unitarian High School in a nearby town. Members of First Unitarian have visited Firtos Martinos on 7 different occasions. Omaha Unitarians who have visited Firtos Martinos tell of many adventures. One involved the attempt to bring back bottles of the local spirituous waters called palinka. We are told that one should ask any of the travelers to Firtos Martinos about the effects of this highly potent beverage. Janet West has for years been the chair of the Partner Church program. The baton has been passed lately to Dave Olson.
Please stand. Please be seated. We will now take our offering. Please, if you are a visitor, let the plate pass you by. The Share the Plate beneficiary for the month of August is Sienna Francis House, and the Change for Change beneficiary is Neighborhood Ministries team.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Give me a moment while I get my lenses adjusted so I can see what I wrote. And while I'm doing that, I'd like to thank Sherry for being our, not only the worship associate today, but our current leader in AHA. So, that's not fail to give her credit for all that work. Before I start my remarks, I'd like to also maybe set the tone of what I might say. And what I mean is shown by a recent conversation I had with my neighbor. And I moved recently. We're out in the yard, and we get to talking across the fence. And religion comes up. And this can be touchy ground out there in the world, and we started talking. And we found out that this lady, very nice lady, expressed her belief in her church and her religion, and that she believes that she's going to be in heaven and that she's going to see her friends. And now, as an atheist, what is my response? When I talk, I have to tell her, as I do with many visitors here, that if you have a belief like that, I honor it. If this gives somebody comfort and solace and hope during life, I'm all for it. The point is that my comments about being a not believer is my belief. And it doesn't affect, it's not an effort to convince somebody else, a visitor here or a lady across the fence, that there's a right and a wrong. How can that be? None of us know the answers. So I just want to set that tone before I start harping about things here. Some clarification may be in order here, especially for our visitors. AHA is one of the groups oriented to various religious beliefs within our church. AHA, A-H-A, all capital, stands for Atheist, Humanist, and Agnostic, or possibly Agnostic, Humanist, and Atheist. At a recent steering team meeting, the question briefly came up, but it wasn't deemed important enough to distract us from the meeting's purpose of planning this service. Does it help to know that our steering team, A, capital A-H-A-S-T, is called AHAST? It occurs to me that my attempt at clarification may, for some, have just muddied the water and upgraded the question to how can a group defined as doubters or non-believers be in a church? Aha! The answer lies to the fact that Unitarian Universalism does not have a creed or doctrine requiring adherence to some belief. Rather, we have principles and living traditions from many sources. The tan pocket cards in the pews with the "we" on the cover list them, and you're welcome to take them with you. I've already distributed one to a new visitor today. And I think our service title today, Good Without God, delivers our message pretty well. I have this opportunity because I started the group and frankly volunteered to do it. In my brief remarks, I'll include my path to atheism, starting AHA. As a child, I don't remember attending church. My parents didn't go or talk about it. My mom took me to the library every week, and I enjoyed it. She often read to me, and by early in grade school, we often took turns reading books out loud to each other. Note that this was during the World War II years without TV or electronic distractions. My choice might be akin to Motorboat Boys on the Mississippi for my reading. Her choices were diabolically educational. That's where church came in. We read a book on world religions. We looked at maps and charts of religions and their basic beliefs in areas all around the world. Mom never said anything in a judgmental way or identified any to be ours, theirs, wrong, or right. Knowledge and information were the goal. Now, looking back all these years, it is possible this is what set me up to eventually become a Unitarian. Thanks, Mom. My only other church connections as a youth occurred in about the 7th grade. I attended a youth religious education class at a nearby Methodist church one evening a week. This probably fulfilled a parental duty to get me some church creds. I was okay with it since I'd been there with for the Boy Scout meetings. My takeaway from the course was that the teacher firmly believed God was an old white guy in a robe sitting on a cloud. Gosh, am I proud of our youth RE and YRU programs. Do you know they study many religions? 2 quick comments before moving on. One, a mere decade later, I was at Navy North Island in San Diego flying supersonic jet fighters, often climbing through the clouds very fast and very high, and empirically proved to my satisfaction that the RE teacher's God is not there. My church creds comment was true. In my recent move, I found an old file with long-forgotten documents showing the class ended with my baptism and joining the church. I'd completely forgotten that. Interestingly, I don't ever again recall being in that church. There's probably a lesson lurking in there, but it's not today's topic. As my life went on, involving all the usual things, marriage, jobs, moves, and so forth, my religious perspective started out pretty much as a nun, N-O-N-E type nun, and drifted into acknowledging I accepted being an agnostic. My working definition was doubter that God exists. My computer's dictionary offers believes it is impossible to know if God exists. The computer's definition of atheist is unbeliever in God or deities. I feel that I need to mention that I, either as an agnostic or an atheist, am in great awe of nature. My career piloting airplanes often provided a nighttime 7-mile-high seat to view the immensity of the stars and, well, the universe or universes. It isn't necessary to believe in God to feel very small and insignificant. Speaking of nature reminds me to mention that my atheism includes not believing in the concept of supernatural. I think everything is natural, but we just don't understand a lot of stuff. However, I remain open to all new knowledge. Emotionally, I'm more open to a capital M on Mother Nature than I am for a capital G on God. Now, as for starting AHA, I started its forerunner, some may remember, the Tolerant Atheist Discussion Group, that's TADG, on my own, and I think in 2010. I'd been in the church over 10 years and knew many others had views similar to mine, so felt comfortable giving it a try. We had good discussions on questions like, how can an atheist be in church? How can an atheist have morality? Things like that. Later, we changed the name to just Tolerant Atheist Group because our emphasis had shifted more toward providing programs with discussions following. The subsequent change to AHA, A-H-A, was just to be more inclusive of the names Atheists, Humanists, and Agnostics. Right now, I think the group AHA needs some stimulation. We are seeking new participants and new ideas. Putting your email on our list is all it takes to be in the group. The steering team, AHAST, is also eager for new members. The steering team meets more often and does more work, so we'd love to have more people. It's a small group, we'd like to have more. New blood. During coffee hour, there's a cardboard display board I set it up on one of the walls. There's a little table sitting there, and it's obvious what it is. And I'll put out a yellow tablet and come on over there and put your email in there if you want to have us put you on the list. And I and some of us will kind of monitor the area to see if we can enter into conversation. Anyhow, in closing, I thank everyone for being here. I've enjoyed it, and we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you very much.
It's always nice to hear from a founding father or grandfather or godfather. Jamie's the man. So I am tasked with giving some observations about the role and roots of agnosticism, humanism, and atheism in our denomination and in the church in general. For brevity's sake, I'm going to refer to the three collectively as rather than repeat that line endlessly. I'm not referring necessarily to the group, but to those three theological perspectives. Defining is no easy task. Like so many aspects of our faith, the quip that if you ask 6 Unitarians for their position on a matter of theology, you will get 12 different answers. It's largely true. Suffice it to say that, as the title of the service this week suggests, we are basically non-theistic with beliefs grounded in the natural, not the supernatural. Types are sometimes thought to be immersed in me-ism. I disagree. Sure, we cherish our doubts. We tend to follow reason and inquiry, not creeds. But we are not cold, insensitive types. We compassionately honor the human race. And we generally see our beloved community and the human race as being more than the sum of its parts. Thus, as a group, types are committed to the betterment of the community, the betterment of the environment, the betterment of the human race. It is also fair to say that types feel that man makes meaning, not a supreme deity. We are more likely to find inspiration from the works of the poets and philosophers rather than sacred texts. Generally, it is our consciousness of ourselves that defines us. Sometimes we may feel uncomfortable with readings and hymns that contain the G-bomb. But certainly, as Jamie pointed out, we respect the belief of theists and non-theists alike. Humanism and non-theistic views in general are integral parts of Unitarian Universalism. Over the years, many UU leaders and clergy have espoused humanist ideologies. Many other writers, philosophers, and public intellectuals have also influenced UU discourse. You can go back to the Age of Reason and see that it is really the prototype for many of these thinkers. Many of our founding fathers were deists who advocated the watchmaker God theory, the idea that some version of a deity did probably create the universe, but after that, this creator God serves as kind of a benign observer, not an interventionist in the affairs of humankind. Ralph Waldo Emerson's vision of divinity was what he called the oversoul. He posited that we are all part of one big soul, thus granting divinity to humans rather than an omnipotent deity. He noted we all have a moral intuition, which he referred to as sparks of divinity. First Unitarian's most famous minister, Newton Mann, was what Samuel Eliot, the president of the UUA at the time of Newton Mann's tenure here, Eliot called him a lyrical theist. I really don't know what that means, but I'm guessing it has something to do with seeing theism as more of a metaphorical, poetic kind of concept. He did this to distinguish his view from more mainstream versions of the G-bomb. Mann's advocacy of Darwin's theory of evolution challenged the biblical creation story and placed the role of nature and man in the center. His 1890 sermon, titled Science and Religion, is a landmark in the canon of Unitarian ministry. He advocated the blending of secular reason, evolutionary biology, and spiritual insights. Reverend Mann's most significant legacy is found in our Bond of Union, which was written in 1891. It's the document to which new members attest when they join. It speaks more of deeds, not creeds, and values rather than theistic beliefs. In the early years of the 20th century, a number of Unitarian ministers, especially in the upper Midwest, began to espouse a humanistic approach to religion. There was a young minister named Charles Lytle who served this congregation from 1920 to 1922. He was an avowed humanist. He published a sermon collection from various Unitarian ministers titled, appropriately enough, Humanist Sermons. The humanist-theist controversy of the 1920s culminated in the adoption of the Humanist Manifesto in 1933. In Reverend Lytle's words, it, quote, sought to replace despondency and doubt of God's loving providence by confidence in the power of human intelligence and cooperative goodwill to become its own providence. Of the 33 signers, 15 were Unitarian ministers. The Humanist Manifesto continues to be a major influence on UU discourse. We had a minister here years ago named Reverend Lawrence Plank. He served our church from 1929 to 1936, and he was one of the most influential and controversial humanist-oriented ministers to occupy our pulpit. His sermon series, titled The New Unitarianism, took a decidedly humanist viewpoint. He noted that the three greatest prophets of the era were Friedrich Nietzsche, the playwright Henrik Ibsen, and Walt Whitman. During the 1920s and 30s, humanism became a potent force among academics, public intellectuals, and many Unitarians. Theism was still fairly common in many Unitarian churches, but was on a decline in many others. In prior years, Unitarianism could still refer to itself as a Christian denomination. However, that designation was out of use by the end of World War II. Our senior minister emeritus, Ron Knapp, has for years focused his preaching on non-theistic themes. I always wondered when one of his sermons, which was titled Why I Am an Atheist, appeared on the wayside pulpit out there, that people driving to work downtown, coming down Harney Street, I wonder how many accidents were caused when people did a double take when they saw the title of a sermon at a church with that title. Bringing us up to the present, we note that one of the key goals of the UUA and our church is how to deconstruct white supremacy in our church, in our society. And how can we increase the number of people of color in our congregations? Our Black Lives Matter sign on the west side of our building is indicative of this goal, but that's merely a start. In conversations, some have suggested that humanism may not always attract African American congregants, since many come from more traditional Protestant backgrounds. Actually, There are quite a few young UU ministers of color who are comfortable with humanism as the key to their personal theology. Recent figures indicate an increase in numbers of people of color in our congregations, our theological schools, and our pulpits. Would seem to indicate that we've made some strides in that area. Patrice Curtis, speaking at the UUA General Assembly last year in Kansas City, noted that her group, which is titled Black Non-Believers, has gained members the last few years. She further listed numerous black civil rights leaders, intellectuals, and writers who were AHA types. The list goes back to Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, more recently Eldridge Cleaver, then Stokely Carmichael, and I would be remiss if I did not mention Nebraska's own State Senator Ernie Chambers, who is an avowed atheist and does not hide that fact. Numerous African American writers, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Richard Wright, Zora Neale Hurston, and Alice Walker are all AHA types. Patrice Curtis further noted that many African American leaders favor a non-theistic focus for dealing with the struggles of people of color, as opposed to relying on a deity to solve these problems. This is, of course, controversial, but so much is nowadays. The future of AHA in UU is hard to predict. Will the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, come flocking to our doors, or will we be a, quote, niche religion? I think we can be certain that the AHA element will continue to be a strong force in our liberal religion.
Excuse me, I am not very tech savvy. I lost what I was going to read. Sure. Oh, I usually get it by pressing. Oh, here.
I know, but last time we had to clear out like a bunch of stuff there.
Here comes Jody. Here, not Jody.
How did this last time?
Yeah, we're going to swap, turn the speakers around. We're going to have Jody speak first, and then Larry will come up.
Okay. Hi. I want to talk about how some things I've read in psychology have affected my understanding of what good is. And I want to start by giving an example. Let's say you're reading the paper and you read about two killers. One of them is a story about a robbery. Someone's house is broken into. The robber's armed. He's assaulting a woman in the house. And the husband takes something heavy. We're going to call this husband Greg. And he and he bops the guy over the head and kills him. And then there's another story just below it, and this one is about an abusive husband who kills his wife, and we're going to call this one Tony. No, there's no Tony in real life. Who kills his wife when a fight between them escalates. So they both kill, but we don't judge them the same way. Most of you would judge the abusive husband, Tony's behavior, as morally wrong, but you'd judge Greg more gently. You might even see Greg as behaving with special bravery and virtue. Whatever judgment you make, in defending it, you would rely on some basic assumptions about what goodness is and how we understand it and choose it. What I want to talk about today is how my recent reading in psychology
has challenged some of the assumptions that I have been depending on and ultimately reshaped the framework through which I personally understand goodness and therefore how I understand stories like those two stories I just told. One of the most foundational assumptions I make when evaluating the morality of people's choices is that they have choices, that we each have free will, and we have the ability to choose good or bad. I recently read a book by Robert Sapolsky, Behave, recommended to me by Suzanne King, and it completely undermined my belief in free will. Sapolsky spends hundreds and hundreds of pages talking about different things that have been scientifically shown to influence our choices, including blood glucose levels, recent sensory inputs, hormones, culture, formative experiences, recent experiences, the socioeconomic status of your birth family, concussions, prenatal environment, certain gene variants, experiencing childhood abuse, recent cognitive load, etc., 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 etc. Eventually, he directly addresses the question of free will. We generally think of free will as meaning there's a soul or spirit or some independent rational actor in our heads which is making choices for us and which has the freedom to make those choices. Sapolsky argues that with the wealth of factors that science shows influencing our decision-making, there's less space for a soul or spirit or rational agent to be acting than we usually think. He says that with enough information about a person's genetics, past experiences, and current situation, you might be able to predict with 50% certainty whether that person would be depressed on a given day. Right now, you could assume that the other 50% comes from their free will. However, Sapolsky points out that the significant majority of research on this topic is from the last 10 years. It seems inevitable that science will identify more factors and that 50% free will get reduced. If the current pace of research continues, it will get reduced significantly. It's his opinion, and I find him pretty persuasive, that the combination of causes we already know and the causes we have yet to identify leaves little space for any soul or free will to be controlling our decisions. One particular example that he uses to support the idea that we don't have free will is this. In one experiment, researchers asked people to watch a clock with a second hand and then intermittently flick their wrist. They were supposed to note the time at which they decided to flick their wrist and write it down right after they did it. Meanwhile, their brains were being scanned. What the brain scans showed was that on average, people's brains indicated activity showing that they were preparing to flick their wrist half a second before the time that they wrote down. In other words, the unconscious portions of the brain had decided to flick the wrist, and it was only afterward that the rational portion of the brain knew about the decision. The rational consciousness, which we generally understand to be the seat of our free will, isn't the one making the decision. It's recognizing a decision that's already been made. For those of you who participated in the book club on Jonathan Haidt last year or who heard Kate Wigg's sermon on him, this is entirely consistent with the arguments he makes in the first third of The Righteous Mind, that moral decisions are made emotionally and the rational part of the brain's role is to justify them afterwards. So let's go back to the story of the two killers that I opened with. If you stop believing that those two individuals have any free will, it affects how you understand those examples. Greg, the man who hit the robber over the head to protect his wife, if you saw him as acting bravely, you no longer understand that bravery as being in his control. His bravery is constructed entirely of the good fortune of his particular combination of genes and experiences. That bravery doesn't reflect in any way on a soul or spirit or rational actor. There's no free will which chose to act nobly, which you can praise for making the virtuous choice. He made the virtuous choice because he got lucky with his brain wiring. Similarly, Tony doesn't freely choose to be abusive. He has an unfortunate combination of genetics and experiences that leads him to behave the way he does. He didn't make those choices because he freely chose a bad action, but because he got unlucky with his brain wiring. What happens to my ability to judge people if I see their moral actions as reflecting the luck of their brain wiring, not the moral quality of their spirit? I have told my students and my children for years that being intelligent doesn't make them good because it's just about luck, but that hard work does make them good because it reflects something they can control. This has been almost a mantra in my house. So you can imagine how disorienting I found it to think of the ability and desire to work hard as also being a result of luck, not the result of greater force of will, but the result of lucky brain wiring. This change in understanding has implications for how we react to and understand people's misdeeds as well as their virtues. In general, in criminal justice, when we see people's actions as being out of their control, because of brain damage or a drug reaction or insanity, we tend to not punish them in the same way that we would punish other people. We don't feel like people who couldn't help what they did deserve punishment or the same punishment. What happens when we understand all people's actions to be out of their control? For me, understanding people as lacking free will means that I have to also understand them as not deserving anything, punishment or prize, for things that are out of their control. But thinking that people don't deserve punishments or prizes isn't the same as thinking there should never be punishments or prizes for different behaviors. Social science makes clear that choices we can make as a society do impact the choices of individuals. If society rewards people for hard work or punishes them for bad behavior, it may not be giving the individual recipients what they deserve, but it does increase hard work and it does decrease crime. However, punishing people or rewarding them based on what benefits society as a whole, rather than what they deserve, feels really instrumental. We are ignoring their humanity and treating them as tools to improve society as a whole, rather than treating them based on their own moral worth as humans. It's definitely problematic, and I don't know how to resolve that difficulty. But what troubles me most about all of this is this. Because our judgment of people's morality traditionally depends on the assumption that they have free will to choose bad or good, I've lost my framework for judging people's morality. It intuitively feels wrong to make someone who hurts children the moral equivalent of someone who spends their life trying to help them. I don't want to stop judging people morally. I'm just not sure that I continue to have a basis for doing so. A friend of mine suggested that I just need to think differently about what a part of a person I'm judging when I make a moral judgment. Instead of assuming that any moral judgment has to be based on free will and free choices, I should make moral judgments of people's makeup, of the genetics and experiences that shape their behavior patterns to lean one way or another. To my friend, if your genetics and experiences are making you make good choices, you are a good person because it's the wiring of your brain that defines your selfhood, regardless of whether you have any freedom in it. I don't know if I agree with her or not. On the one hand, I have a strong emotional need to make moral judgments, and this way I get to. On the other hand, I also want to feel that if I'm making moral judgments, it's based on something people can control. The way I've thought about this recently has been to think of morality as being like intelligence. You can't control how much intelligence you get, and I can't judge someone's worth as a person based on their intelligence, but I can judge their worth for a specific task or job based on their intelligence. If I'm going to ride in a self-driving car, I sincerely hope that the people who designed it are really smart. That doesn't mean they're better people, it means they're better for that job. In the same way, I can judge people as being better for certain situations based on the morality of their choices. So I'd way rather be friends with, or be married to, or governed by someone who consistently makes moral choices, even if that person doesn't have more worth as a human being. So to go back to my opening example, I don't think Greg, the protective husband, is worth more as a human being than Tony, the wife killer, but I'd definitely rather be married to him.
Thank you for your patience. Thank you to Amy Lucas for helping me, and thanks to Jody for filling in my spot. I'm borrowing from Mark Bellatini. Live simply, gently, at home in yourselves. Act justly, speak justly, remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance, speak the truth, or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all people in the world, beginning with yourselves, and go as you go with the dream of that peace in your heart. Now, I think these words could be appreciated by all of us, especially those of us who are atheists, humanists, or agnostics. My talk is a 5-minute take on agnosticism and being an agnostic. First, a definition from Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Agnostic, a noun referring to one who believes that nothing is known or can be known of the existence or nature of God or of anything beyond material phenomena. An agnostic claims neither faith nor disbelief when it comes to God. Some synonyms are cynic, questioner, doubter, and challenger. Merriam-Webster refers to an agnostic as simply irreligious. It also says that the word agnostic first appeared in 1869, the same year we began a church here in Omaha. And in 1869, it first appeared and was first coined by the English biologist Thomas Henry Huxley, and it was formed from the Greek agnostos, that is, unknown or unknowable. An agnostic is, and I quote, a person who does not have a definite belief about whether God exists or not. At this time, I think I should say that I think I'm an agnostic. I don't feel or believe or intuit that I am, and I consider it to be an important part or element of being agnostic to think. For a while, especially a couple of years ago, my mind took me to a place where I was at least leaning toward atheism. And I felt remarkably comfortable and free at that time. And I am atheistic in that I do not accept the idea that there exists one totally comprehensive, all-knowing, interested spiritual being. However, I do think that there are forces that create and uphold life. I just don't know what they are, and I don't feel a need to know. I do believe that there's something integral to our whole human makeup, perhaps peculiar to our humanity, that leads us to be greater than we are, and that leads us to seek reassurance that there's something greater than ourselves. I think that we should try to find the sacred in everything, and that there's something sacred and powerful, even in very day-to-day things like the human smile. I think there's a lot of power in the human smile. I think the children of First Unitarian were quite precocious when they published their covenant in 2013. I quote, in part, "Be kind, learn, respect others' opinions, have fun together, make beautiful things, practice peace, include everyone, and stick together." In closing, a couple of quotes that I find comforting and inspiring. The first from Max Ehrmann. "You are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt the universe is unfolding as it should." And finally, I'd like you all to remember, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. Thank you.
Please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 287. Within each of our hearts, there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be a guide in your decisions. Go forth and bring its ray of hope to those in need of help in both body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion to heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness of the world. Go forth and share your glorious light with the world.